that's a big job. I thought long and hard about what I was going to say today and how I was going to say it in a way that wasn't boring. I said I started in the sector in 1989. I was told then that the reason there aren't any black people in leadership was there weren't enough of us, we weren't qualified, they didn't know where to find us. 2023, I'm still getting the same excuses, and I'm old enough not to care about what will happen to me if I shout out. So I'm going to try and summarise all the issues that pertain to housing, asylum seeking, migration, etc., in about 7 minutes. So wishing you well. So I decided I'm going to take a different approach. So I'm going to start by sharing with you a list of things that I'm not happy about. The list is so long I had to write it down. So the first thing I'm not happy about is the fact that we, as a rich, affluent country, have a phenomenal cost of living crisis. And as someone who is a landlord, who works for landlords, has neighbours and friends, I think it's shocking that we have people who work full-time who cannot afford to eat, who can afford to heat their homes, and I'm constantly cold because I've turned my heat down. I'm not happy about poverty generally. Again, we have too much money in this country. Some people have enough money to spend 10 minutes in space for billions of pounds, and some people can't afford to eat. Is this getting depressing yet? Let me just see. I'm not happy that there's not as many people as I'd like in this room today that look like me. I think there should be more in here, especially in my Bristol. I'm not happy that a lot of people I've been speaking to lately who say they're passionate about social housing are not members of the Chartered Institute of Housing. If you're a member of the Chartered Institute of Housing, could you raise your hands, please? You give yourselves a round of applause. Seriously, thank you. For those of you that aren't, I want to know why not. Okay, you need to join the Institute of Housing. The more members we have, the more powerful we become. Having said that, I think Michael Gove has stolen my thunder, because now that it's mandatory that senior housing managers have the qualification that I've had for years, maybe I don't need to bother about that anymore. But it is worth your while, it's good value for money, and I think if you work in the sector, you should represent the sector. That was not just me paying the bills, I believe that. I've been a member of the Institute of Housing since 1995. I'm unhappy about the rapid turnover of housing ministers. I think that's just completely out of order. How can you strategize and plan if you don't know who the next minister is going to be and the next person is going to come and change their mind? I'm unhappy that it took the death of a little black boy for us as a sector to wake up and sort out what we do with damp and mold, and not blame, as I was taught when I was a housing officer all those many years ago, that it's because they take the bath out of a bucket. And I used to think, how does it, whether it's coming out of a bucket, a bath or a shower, how does that make any difference? But that's what I was taught as a young housing officer in the 90s. That was our explanation. And I think it's appalling that it's taken the death of someone who looks like me for us to get our act together in the sector. I'm very, very unhappy that I work in a sector that has the worst reputation. We're almost as bad as politicians or estate agents. It is shocking that people that I know for years who had no idea what I did for a living now say, Lara, what you housing people do, you're just killing your tenants and burning their properties down. That's what we're known for. And I feel very ashamed for that. I'm unhappy about that. We have a bad reputation. Now, I know Victor mentioned the Better Social Housing Review a few minutes ago, which is a good thing, but I'm unhappy about it. How did we get to a place where we need to have a commission to tell us that it is our responsibility to listen to what our tenants say, respond to their opinions, and just be the the social landlords that we were set up to be. Did we really need a commission to tell us that? Yes, I'm unhappy about that. I'm unhappy about the cost of homes. I'm unhappy that young people these days will struggle to ever become homeowners. I'm unhappy about the cost of renting. And I'm happy about the fact that property generally in this country is seen as an asset for making money rather than a human right. However, I will caveat that in Scotland it's different. So yo Scotland. I'm also happy about Windrush. Windrush, we now call it Windrush, the Windrush scandal. I have personal beef with that because they tried to deport my parents after 60 odd years in this country. Totally out of order. I'm unhappy also at the time that I felt the social housing sector said nothing about it. We all kept our heads down and ignored our colleagues, our friends, our tenants being homeless, unable to work, and we did nothing about it. And I actually feel very ashamed about that. I'm unhappy, again, Victor stole my thunder here, I'm unhappy that Quajo, that young, fabulous young man, has to show us up. And I'm unhappy that the majority of the cases that he shows up are people who have brown skin and black skin, trying to work out what that's all about. I'm almost done with my list, folks. I'm unhappy that Grenfell happened. And I'm additionally unhappy that no housing person has resigned their job as a result of that. Politicians have resigned, but no housing person has resigned. And this links into the comment I was saying about Michael Gove, who introduces this professionalisation, that if the people in charge of Grenfell were dentists, they would not be practising dentistry. If they were accountants, they wouldn't be doing accounting. If they were nurses, they would not be practising nurses. We're in a sector where there's no barrier to entry, which means you can't keep people out if they do something wrong. I think it's shocking that no one in the sector has put their hands up and had to resign and live with the consequences of the various decisions that were made that meant that Grenfell happened. I'm unhappy that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and those of us in the middle are just generally stressed out. I'm unhappy about that. And I'm unhappy that there are so few people who look like me in boardrooms and in senior leadership teams, but if you go to organisations, the reception staff will look like me, the person serving your tea will look like me, the guy cleaning will look like me, the guy, whatever, you know, the front line rows. They're going to look like me, they're going to be diverse. But when you get to where the big decisions are made, for some reason we're not making it there. I don't know if it's because we're not good enough, or we're not applying, or we're not letting us in. Whatever it is, it ain't good enough. And I'm unhappy generally about social inequality. And it's interesting, when I applied to be the Vice President of the Chartered Institute of Housing, I actually never thought that I would get elected. So for those of you that are members that voted for me, thank you very much, I'm very grateful. So I applied thinking, no one's ever going to vote for me, so I did not have a campaign ready. So now I'm going to tell you some of the things that I'm grateful for. Yeah, hopefully this will cheer you up and it'll help you put today's work into context. The reason I thought I'd give you the list of things I'm unhappy about is I thought, rather than go through all the policies, which people are going to talk about in the sessions to come, the practicals, the legal statuses, the good practice, and all that kind of things that we do at conferences, I thought I'd put it into context, because I'm passionate about all of these things, but I can only change so many things. So I'm trying to make the little changes in the places that I can. So I'm grateful, first of all, to still be alive. There was a few years ago where I was depressed and suicidal, and I remember one time walking into traffic and I didn't get run over. I'm very happy about that. So I am very grateful to still be alive today. I'm grateful that we're living in a world now where I can actually talk about being depressed and suicidal, and it's not a weird thing. At the time, I didn't tell anybody. The only people that knew was my boss and my GP. I'm very grateful for social housing. Social housing has saved my life. I was homeless when I was 19, sleeping rough, and I went to the homeless persons unit every day, and after a couple of months, I got a flat. It was a 2-bedroom flat on the top floor of a really disgusting council block. I loved it because it was mine. My question to the sector was, well, I started in 1989, there was lots of people who looked like me. A lot of those people have risen in the ranks, the head of departments, this, that and the other. Where are they? Why are they not in the boardrooms that I'm in? So I thought I'll combine all those, because I like to make life really easy for myself, and make that the focus of my presidential campaign. So my presidential campaign, the hashtag is Representation Matters, and the challenge is to the sector is to ask why, in 2023, the majority of our boardrooms not represent the demographics of our tenants. Why do those boardrooms not represent the demographics of our staff? Because the housing sector is a diverse sector. It's just diverse at the lower level. And the last part of that question is, why do our boardrooms, and this also applies to most executive teams, still not represent the communities that we work in? So if you're a housing association in London, I know London well, almost 40% of London population is non-white. But you can still go into some of the G15 housing associations, they're the big ones in London, they're called G15, with predominantly white boardrooms. And that is totally out of order. So my challenge to the sector in my 1 year of presidency is to say why your boardrooms still are diverse. I'm pointing them out to you, so what you're going to do about it. Let me see what my slide is saying. So the charity that I've chosen is called Shoe Aid. And Shoe Aid is based in Nottingham, and what Shoe Aid does is they collect shoes. I see some of you brought shoes today, which is great. You can donate later. Shoe Aid collects shoes for homeless, well, initially it was homeless families, and then a few months ago they started donating shoes to anyone that was referred, because as I said previously, we have lots of families who don't have money, and everybody needs a decent pair of shoes. So I decided I was going to pick Shoe Aid for my charity, and also it was going to be a more inclusive presidential campaign, because historically, the way to contribute to a presidential campaign is to donate money. But a lot of my colleagues are skins. We don't have money. But every single one of us in this room has at least one pair of shoes that you're not wearing. So everybody can donate in terms of shoes. And that's why I picked that charity. So when I speak to boardrooms, this is the slide that I showed them. So you've got slide A. These are two genuine housing association boards. So those of you in the sector will recognise the people in Board A. I don't know if any of you know Avinda Gogo. Anyone around know Avinda? Anyway, she's been around forever and ever. Yeah. So slide A. Board A and Board B. Both in multicultural cities. So my question is, say for example, we're talking about how do we help our residents manage through the cost of living crisis? I would imagine that the conversation in Board B would be a lot more interesting than the conversation in Board A. The range of opportunities, the range of ideas, the range of connections in Board B would be much more representative than that of Board A. I know Ravinda's great, but she's the only non-white person in that boardroom. She's an Asian woman of a certain age. People often ask me, can I actually prove that diverse boardrooms make a difference? And I said, I'm not even going to bother to do that. What I'm going to prove is the negative. So those of you may know about the Commonwealth Burial Commission. And during the Second World War, they're responsible for burying dead soldiers. And this was way back in the olden days, during the colonial era, where the commission decided that all the black and brown soldiers did not deserve headstones, because if you look at that quote at the bottom, it says the average native would not understand or appreciate a headstone. So all the black and brown soldiers were put in a communal grave with no headstone and no recognition whatsoever. And all the white soldiers had individual graves with headstones. Now my point, the reason I use that as an example, is I know for certain, had they had a native on that commission, that would not have passed. And it's that simple. It's understanding and appreciating other people's cultures, other people's way of life, what other people do. One person cannot represent all of us. We all bring different things to the table. London is very diverse, and this is representative of any part of London. Next slide. But this slide, who knows who these people are? Anyone know who these are? These are the decision makers that gave evidence to the Grenfell inquiry. So my point is, are they really telling me that in London of today, there are no black people that can fit in any of those roles? These are architects, accountants, I don't know, team leaders, head of departments, surveyors, etc., etc. These are the people that made the decisions along the complicated chain that resulted in that block of flats burning down. And this is my challenge to the sector. Why is the leadership not representative of the people that we are serving? So my challenge to you, my request to you, is when you go back to your organisations, for those of you that are senior or in your senior leadership teams, ask yourself the question, does my leadership team represent my tenant? Does it represent the organisation I work for? Does it represent the communities that I work for, or the communities that we serve? And if it doesn't, then what on earth are you doing about it? Why are you happy for that status quo to continue? So what I ask for you to do is continue to do the good work that you're doing. Work with your partners, adopt good practice. You know all this. For those of you that are housing associations, I would suggest that you adopt the SHARP. I think Khalid is going to talk about that later. And don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. We have to do more of that. Now, I can't remember if in my list I forgot to mention that one of the things I'm really, really, really unhappy about is how this country currently talks about refugees and asylum seekers. It is appalling, it is inhumane. And I said, but for the love of God, that could be any one of us. I predicted the war in Ukraine. I didn't know it was going to be Ukraine, but I remember saying to my friends a few years ago, I said, you know something's going to happen one day in Europe where white people are going to be refugees. And I thought it was going to be climate change. I never thought it was going to be a war. I said it could happen to anybody at any time. So I don't know what to do about that, but it's one of those things that upsets me, and I think we should be a more caring, compassionate and kind society. So I'm going to end on that note. Thank you for listening, and I hope I have a question for you.